Merry Christmas. So what instinctively comes to your mind when you hear those words, Merry Christmas? In other words, what is Christmas to you? I think some of you would say it really is the most wonderful time of the year. How many of you would fit into that category? I mean, you love everything about it. You like the sights, the sounds, the Christmas music that plays in department stores. Some of you are waving at me right now, wanting to sing one of those songs. We'll get to that later. You like the smells of hot chocolate and cookies baking. In other words, you love everything about Christmas. Everything that it is attractive to you. You like the family gatherings, and you love the company parties, and you love it all. You even like the Hallmark Christmas movies. How many of you like the Hallmark Christmas movies? Yeah, both of you. I'm glad you're here today. No, just kidding. But others of you, not so much. In fact, it's the opposite for some of you. You don't love Christmas, you actually loathe it. For some of you, and maybe not just you, but for some of our population, Christmas is one of the darkest times of the year. And that may seem ironic, but it's precisely what Christmas is or why it is. The very first command that God gave in creation was what? Do you remember the very first command God gave to his creation? Let there be light. And there was. And then Jesus stepped into this world, and he says, I am the light of the world. And then specifically in reference to Christmas, or what it represents, the why of it, look at what it says in John chapter 12, verse 46. I have come as a light to shine in this dark world, so that all who put their trust in me will no longer remain in the darkness. He's not talking about physical darkness. You're saying, well, then what is he talking about? If he said he came into this world as light, how many of you know when Jesus entered the world, God had already given the command, let there be light, and there was day and there was night the first day and then every day after that. But now fast forward the tape a few thousand years, and all the prophets foretold that there would come this Messiah, and he steps in this world that already has light, and he says, I'm the light of the world. So what was he saying here when he said, I have come as a light to shine in this dark world? He wasn't talking about physical darkness. Listen to him. He was talking about personal darkness. It could be for any number of reasons, but what we really know is it's personal. Really personal. Maybe some of you can relate to a letter that was written, because we're in a series called Letters at Christmas, and there's a family that's journeying with us and us with them that's a part of the family here called 3D. And I interacted with them and asked them, what they would say, and here's their Christmas letter. Dear friends and family, here we are at the end of another year. I pray that you and your family are well and that your year has been filled with many blessings. My year started off with an answer to prayer as God blessed me with a new job opportunity with Lockheed Martin, which I started in March and has proven to be a very good move. While the workload is still as stressful as it was at my former employers, the work environment and the management team has greatly improved. I'm so grateful for this blessing. Juanita and her husband Steve are doing well. Their family is always on the go doing something. Jasmine and Ella are growing up so fast. Jasmine turned 12 this year. She's going on 15. And if you have a pre-teener, you know that journey. And Ella is 7. Jazzy is in her 4th year of karate, and I'm certain she could handle her own if she ever needed to. And little Ella loves her gymnastics lessons and scored a pretty nice lump recently on her forehead after attempting to dismount from her parents' bed. They both bring me so much joy. Moving in with them last year has proven to be such a blessing. After the year of loss that our family has experienced, it makes coming home to them even more precious. While this year has been filled with many great memories, such as a weekend spent with Jasmine Ella at Glenwood Springs and taking Rodney to his first Elizabeth County Fair, we also had a year filled with sorrow. As many of you know, I lost my mom at the end of March, which I am still grieving over. Life without her has been exceptionally hard, as she was my biggest encourager when I needed support and when I just needed an ear to listen. I miss our talks and trips to Black Hawk. I sometimes wonder if God took my mom to prepare me for the even bigger loss of Rodney. Again, as many of you know, Rodney was born with a genetic disorder and unfortunately passed at the end of October. There are no words that can describe how it feels to lose a grandchild. It's something that I pray you never have to experience, and I never have to experience again. I've been amazed at the strength and courage that Jenny and Robert have exhibited throughout the past 15 months. They were blessed with this special child and both stepped up to the challenge. While Rodney's life was too short by my watch, his journey has provided strength and encouragement to more people than I believe I have in my entire lifetime. He taught our family so much throughout his journey, and even now, his legacy lives on. And while I'm deeply saddened by his loss, I'm also honored that I was chosen to be his Grammy. Heaven gained such a beautiful little angel the day he passed, and I look forward to the day when I can spend eternity with him whole and free. So as we enter into 2018, of course I am hoping for my family. It is a year that brings great healing, and I'd like to provide encouragement to you and your family as well during this Christmas season. No matter what life brings you or what you are going through, God's promise is found in Isaiah 43, 1 through 3. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they will not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flames shall not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. God's blessing until we meet again. Have a wonderful Christmas, a safe and happy New Year. Love, Rhonda. First of all, Rhonda, thank you for writing that. I'm just checking in with my emotions right now and what's in the room, but can I just say, everybody has dark days? How many of you would acknowledge this is earth and not heaven? And therefore, stuff happens as we journey through life, and not everything that happens is favorable or to our advantage or to our liking, and yet that's the reality. So we all have to grapple with this thing called personal darkness, and the good news is that Jesus came into this world to step into our personal space and dispel the darkness. But before we get into what that looks like, let's identify what just a few of the personal dark days could be. First, I would identify, and I'll sort of layer these in. I'll just identify three. There are probably a lot more, but categorically you might find that anything you experience in life falls into one of these three categories, and they sort of take on a level of intensity as we go. But the first would be dark days of disappointment. Now, before I read on, how many of you have ever been disappointed? Okay. Disappointment is what? The result of unfulfilled expectations. So if you're expecting anything more than what you currently have and it never happens, or something less than that happens, you are going to be disappointed. Job experienced that, chapter 30, verse 26. I hoped for happiness and light, but trouble and darkness came instead. How many of you have ever experienced that? You hoped for one thing and got another. My hand's up. The fact is, life is disappointing sometimes. Things don't always go as planned. Some of you are in for some big disappointments in the next 3 weeks. I'm just here to inform you. I'm not being negative. I'm real positive. I'm positive. Some of you are going to be greatly disappointed over the next 3 weeks. You're saying, what do you mean by that? You're going to think you're getting something for Christmas, and you're not going to get it. I experienced that as a kid. I had forever wanted a basketball when I was a little boy. And finally one year I thought my basketball arrived. I saw this package sitting under the tree. It was round, it was wrapped, and I couldn't wait to open it. And on Christmas Eve, which is our family tradition, we went to church, we came home from church, and we got to open our presents. And I went to open this present that had been long awaited for, looking for my basketball. And sure enough, as soon as I ripped the paper off, I knew that I was blessed with a globe. Some of you are going to get a globe this Christmas. I'm just here to tell you. So there's not only dark days of disappointment, there are dark days of what I'd call distress. Distress. Psalm chapter 22, verse 1, I have cried desperately for help, but still it does not come. How many of you ever felt that way? You cried desperately for help, but it didn't come. It didn't happen. and you need help. You're overwhelmed and no one's there to help you. You feel like you're left to fend for yourself. And it reminds me of a little boy that got separated from his mom just recently. Actually, it was on Black Friday here at Park Meadows Mall. And he was standing at a door by one of the major department stores, and one of the managers saw him and noticed he'd been there for a while and was a little concerned. And so the manager came over and got down at his level and spoke to this little boy. And as he was standing there crying, people coming in started giving him money. And at that point, the manager acknowledged this, and he came back to the little boy and says, "You know what?" He said, "We found your mommy. We know where she is." He says, "So do I. Don't tell her." This is working out pretty good. Some of you are in dark days of distress right now. You might be stressed out financially, and yet you're moving into Christmas. You may be stressed out physically, so some health concerns. You may be stressed out relationally. Your marriage is under stress right now and duress. It's making enjoying Christmas, if you got real honest, really difficult. All is not well with you and one of your kids. And just thinking about getting together for Christmas is distressing to you. In fact, I would submit that one of the primary reasons Christmas is so challenging, even painful for some, is tied to the fact that Christmas is something that is meant to be shared. And if I don't have anyone to share it with, or for a variety of reasons I'm not able to share it with someone I used to, then I hurt. And as a result, the joys, sorrows, and challenges, relationships, and life are more apparent at this time of year. How many of you know what I'm talking about? In other words, the challenges didn't change. They're just amplified as we put the focus on a holiday season that's meant for relationships. In fact, I just heard a statistic this last week as I was doing some research and studying, and there are more suicides between the bookends of Thanksgiving and New Year's than there are combined the other 11 months of the year. Why? Because we're relational beings. We're made for connection. And yet the primary arena that comes under attack is our relational life. And what is the primary expression of sentencing for someone that commits a crime? Solitary confinement. Why? Because they know there's nothing more painful than to isolate somebody from healthy relational connection. Psalm 88, verse 18, lover, friend, acquaintance, all are gone. There's only darkness everywhere. How many of you would agree with this? If relationships are going well, life is good. But if your relationships are strained, life stinks. Some of you would agree with that. And so we're going to journey with you for the next few weeks on this Letters at Christmas. I can't wait. Next Sunday's going to be incredible. The following Sunday, kids are going to be a part, and then I'll bring a message, an abbreviated message after that. Christmas Eve, by the way, mark your calendars now. It's on a Sunday. We will not have a Sunday morning service at 10 a.m. We'll have an afternoon service at 3 p.m. So begin now to set your plans and mark your calendars and invite your family and friends to come, because Christmas Eve is the number one re-entry point of people coming back to church. So think about who it is that's close to you that's still far from God, and bring them with you on Christmas Eve. We're going to have an amazing time together. Shortened service, a lot of music, a lot of fun, a lot of laughter, a lot of life. The message is dear everyone. How many of you know that God has something for every one of us on Christmas? And so that's where we're going. And then in January, we're doing an incredible series. I can't wait. It's going to, I think, reset the course for most of us throughout the rest of the year if we dive in and apply it. And then in the month of February, we're going to do an entire series on relationships, just because relationships are so crucial in our life. But some of you have experienced a significant loss in the last year, not just the family that we read the Christmas letter from, but there's loss in other areas. You got laid off this last year. You lost your job. Maybe you went through a divorce, or you too lost a loved one. And as a result, you don't feel so happy at the holidays. In fact, could I say it this way? The happiness that others are experiencing only seems to intensify your pain and loneliness. And so while you're grieving inside, all the sounds of laughter actually somewhat exasperate your feeling of hurt and pain. And so what do you do with that? Well, that leads to the third category I give of personal darkness. So you have dark days of disappointment, dark days of distress, but the third one I would identify as dark days of depression. When you're depressed, you feel like, here's what you feel when you're depressed. What's the use? Or what the, you fill in the blank. You don't want to get out of bed in the morning. You're afraid to face the world. You don't feel like it's worth the effort. You don't want to see anybody. You just want to throw in the towel. You want to quit. Maybe the job, maybe the marriage, maybe the relationship, maybe life. Lamentations 3, the thought of my pain is bitter poison. I think of it constantly, and my spirit is what? Everybody say it together. My spirit is. So what do you say to someone who's experiencing dark days? What would God say to them? Well, this is precisely where the story of Christmas becomes so incredibly relevant and powerful. The Father promised it, the prophets foretold it, and Jesus fulfilled it. Now, all four of the Gospels give their account of the story of the Messiah and Jesus entering this world and the Christmas story, if you will. We're going to lean into a couple of them today and over the next couple of weeks. But Matthew chapter 1, his account, he says, so she will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will be with child and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means what? Everybody? God with us. So what does that really mean? The name Emmanuel, I believe, is at the heart of the Christmas story. And you have to understand that the presence of God was the premium throughout history of God's people. Everybody wanted to be in God's presence, to experience His presence. It was the one thing that only the high priest was allowed to go into the real, literal, manifest presence of God. And that only once a year for a sacrifice to be offered up. And so everybody longed to be in God's presence. And the prophets were telling, there's coming a Messiah. His name's going to be Emmanuel, which means God with us. And they're all waiting, and they're waiting, and they're waiting. And finally, he shows up on the scene. But what does it mean? What difference does it make? It's the very thing that gives us hope. Because of Christmas, listen to me, we don't have to stay in the dark. Jesus came to dispel the darkness. How many of you know that light dispels darkness? And when Jesus said, I have come as a light to dispel darkness, how many of you know as soon as you turn a light on in a room, darkness has to go? They cannot coexist in the same space. And so you and I will either live in personal darkness, I'm talking about internal, mental and emotional darkness, or we will let Jesus into that space, and when he steps in, darkness goes. It has to. So how does that happen? Because you might be thinking, that sounds good, but how? Well, I'm glad you asked. You did, didn't you? Okay. So real quick, parallel to the three areas of personal darkness, I'm going to give a response of what it looks like when Jesus invades that area of darkness. And so when I'm dealing with disappointment, God is my confidence. When I'm dealing with disappointment, God is my confidence. How many would agree life is disappointing at times? Maybe you didn't get that job, that promotion, the expectation that we referenced earlier, that relationship didn't work out. And if you're like me, you can even be disappointed in yourself. How many of you have ever been disappointed in yourself? Okay, the rest of you are just in denial and you're disillusioned. But I have been. So where do you find confidence in? Isaiah the prophet, chapter 43, verses 2 and 3. When you go through deep waters, isn't it amazing? These are the verses that Rhonda put in her Christmas letter. I never shared any of my notes with her. And I already had my message prepared because I had a pretty full week. I was out of town with some business and some play with the family. And then I was already, I actually, you can ask Aaron and the creative team. I had to put the message together a week in advance. So here are my notes. And in her Christmas letter come the exact same verses. Here it is. When you go through deep waters and great trouble, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, your Savior, the Holy One of Israel. You will go through the fire. It says when. Therefore, first of all, challenges and dark days are inevitable, but through, they're also temporal. You might want to write that down. Dark days are inevitable, but they are also temporal. You're going to go through them. How many of you know this too shall pass? I think it was Winston Churchill that said, if you're going through hell, just keep going. Meaning you're going through it. You're not meant to camp there, to live there. But and here's the point. I would take it a step further. You're not alone. None of us can predict the problems we're going to face. But one thing we can be certain of, God will go through it with us. In other words, God is my confidence. Here's the first benefit. When I'm disappointed, you can write this down even though it's not in your notes. When I'm disappointed, God's presence, because this is the impact of Emmanuel, God with us. So when I'm disappointed, God's my confidence because He's with me. And the fact that God is with me when I'm disappointed means that God's presence cheers me up. Just knowing God is with me gives me confidence and joy. How many of you have ever how many of you remember your first day at school? Some of you are far too old for that. Maybe I better find something else. How many remember your first day on the new job? And maybe it was a little bit intimidating, but having somebody there that you knew or somebody with you gave you confidence. There's something significant about that. Psalm 1 or chapter 16, verse 11 says, "Your presence," are you ready for this? "Your presence fills me with joy." Another translation, actually, the King James Bible says, in your presence is fullness of joy. There's something about the presence of God. I've said this for decades. I believe it to my core. God's presence makes everything right. Think about it. You could be going through whatever it is that life wants to throw at you, but when God manifests Himself in that space, in that place to you, all of a sudden everything's okay. God's presence cheers me up. Second, when I'm dealing with distress, God is my companion. It's interesting to me that never have there been more people alive on the face of the planet. We're somewhere around 7.5 billion people now on the face of the planet. And never have we been more connected. I mean, the internet and social media, and we're more connected with ever. There's more people on the planet than ever, and yet people, are you ready for this, are lonelier than ever. There's never been as much loneliness per capita as there is in today's society. And there's the loneliness of death. There's a loneliness that comes with divorce. There's a loneliness of always traveling as a business person and being on a trip and never with your family and watching your kids grow up, a new school, success. Even when you climb that corporate ladder, so to speak, and you get that corner office or you get your own business and they say it's lonely at the top. In some ways it is. That's why it's a good thing to bring other people with you. But even when you can't, it's good to know that God is with you. As most of you know, I do some coaching in the corporate context as well, and a lot of people we work with are in that C-suite world, and what I found is this, that people in that context will oftentimes pay big money just to have a friend. Because within 3 weeks to 3 months of an engagement with a senior executive, you'll find that most of what they want to talk about is personal, not professional. Why? They just need a friend. They need a companion. Psalm 25, verse 16, "Turn to me and be merciful because I am lonely," the psalmist said. Let me ask you this. Can you be lonely in a crowd? Oh, heck yeah. I think one of the loneliest moments of my life was when I was in Russia. Now, this is granted going back over 20 years ago. The wall had come down, and we were invited to go in and help with some church planning engagement, and it was a blast. It was fun, but the second trip I went, so I'd been there once. I went back 2 years later. And the guy picked me up at the airport. He was my translator and sort of my guide for my time there. And we stopped at the bank to exchange some money because we paid for the churches that we planted. And he had to convert it, to rubles and get cash for it. And he says, I think I can get a better rate over here. And it was a little bit on the black market, which is how most of Russia's economy would function. And he pulled me to the side, and as we were no more than 30 seconds, probably 15 seconds into a conversation with a guy off to the side, inside of a bank, by the way, and all of a sudden the guys with their AK-47s had come over, grabbed his arms, took my money, and I won't tell you how much, it wasn't mine, it was a church that I was with at the time, took all that money, had him cuffed, and I'm standing there by myself, and they're having all this elevated conversation. I don't have a clue what they're saying, and I'm like feeling really lonely, and then all of a sudden they take me and hike me back down a hallway, dark place, into another room, and have me sit there, and I'm all by myself. And yet, I'm not all by myself because there was a whole room full of people. How many of you know you can be in a crowd and be incredibly lonely? You're saying, well, what happened? Tell us the rest of the story. Come back next week. You'll get that. But I will tell you this. As soon as one of the guys came down the hallway and I heard English, I was like to break out in the Star-Spangled Banner. I don't care. God bless America. Hallelujah. Somebody in this house knows my language. I mean, there's nothing like it to know that somebody knows your language. Huh? Somebody knows where you're at. Somebody knows what you're dealing with. So what do you do when you have those uncontrollable moments of loneliness? I think when we face a challenge and are feeling distress, we like to have somebody with us. As I just mentioned, maybe it's the first day at school or the first day on the job or wherever it is. We like to have reinforcements. And the second benefit of God's presence, first, it cheers me up, but it also calms me down. How many of you know what I'm saying? Hebrews 13 said, God has said, never will I leave you and never will I forsake you. Never will I abandon you. You'll never be on your own for the rest of your life. I will forever be with you. In Jesus, we have a constant companion who lives in us by the person of the Holy Spirit. And by the way, it's not just any spirit. It's the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead dwells in us. All the time, not just some of the time, not just when we feel good, but when we feel bad. Not just when we feel happy, but when we feel alone. He is with us forever. We have a constant companion. His name is Jesus. Through the person of the Holy Spirit, He is always with us. And third and finally, when I'm dealing with depression, God is my comforter and my counselor. I couldn't differentiate. It's a both and. He's the comforter and the counselor. Psalm chapter 34, verse 18. The Lord is near those who are discouraged. He saved those who have lost all hope. Here's the truth, friends. God feels your hurt. He knows when you're discouraged, but He not only knows when you're discouraged, but why you're discouraged. He knows when you're depressed. He knows when you feel so low you don't want to get out of bed in the morning. And whatever it is you're going through right now, listen to me. This isn't hype. This isn't just like some Christian wishful thinking for the weak. This is for the weary. This is for the strong. This is for every person on the planet. The truth is, friends, whatever you're going through, you're not going through it alone. The most beloved psalm ever in any country, any culture, Psalm 23. David, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, seeing God as a shepherd in the light of how He functioned as a shepherd to sheep. And he said, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I don't have time to unpack all of this, but suffice it to say, if you do a quick study on Psalm 23, you'll begin to realize that something shifts when he gets to this place of darkness. He begins by saying, what? Psalm 23, verse 1, the Lord is my shepherd. Therefore, I shall not lack. I have everything that I need. I shall not want. And what's verse 2 say? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And He what? He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He causes me to walk in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. And then he gets into this verse that we just read here in verse 4. And then he says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. He didn't say because He is with me. He says because you are with me. How many of you know when you're facing darkness, you don't need a God you can talk about. You need a God you can talk to. You don't need a God that you can reference that's off in the distance somewhere. Who was the lady that sang God is distant? Years ago. Bette Midler, yeah, thank you, Bette. How many know God isn't distance? Jesus' finished work at the cross removed all distance. And in Christmas, God came near. Thank you, Max Lucado. And how he's forever present. There's no distance between you and your Creator. So how do people, I ask this. I've heard some of you ask me this. Keith, how do people make it through dark days without the comforting presence of a relationship with Jesus? In other words, how do you get through the valley? He says, even though I go through the valley. In other words, you're in the valley, but you're going through it. The difference is what you choose to believe while you're in it, because you will be in it. Valleys are inevitable. They just are. They're a part of life. But how many of you know it's the valleys that make the mountaintops that much better? And so what do you choose to believe? The lie, I'm alone. God, where are you? Or the truth, Father, I thank you that you promised that you would never leave me and that you are with me always, even in the valley. You are, there's a reference to the name of God. In one place in the Old Testament, he's referenced as the lily of the valley. You know what that is in reference to? How many of you know what a lily is? How many of you like lilies? All you ladies got your hands up. You guys or dudes are saying no way. But lilies actually give off a nice fragrance, do they not? And what is God revealing about himself as the lily of the valley? A valley was actually in reference to a dark place or a garbage dump. And what he is really saying is, God, I thank you that you are the sweet-smelling fragrance even in the messy places of life. And even there you're with me, but you're not just with me. You're the one that in the midst of that mess gives us a sweet fragrance. Isn't it good to know that he's with us, but he's not just with us, how he's with us, who he is when he's with us. He's our comforter. Beyond that, he's our counselor. Psalm 116, verses 8 through 11, the Lord saved me from death. He stopped my tears and kept me from defeat. And so I walk in the presence of the Lord in the world of the living. I kept on believing, even when I said I am completely crushed, even when I was afraid and said no one can be trusted. I think that what you would find at the core of such claims is, I feel like I'm all alone right now. It's just like there's no one that can be trusted. I think what is at the core, there's something even deeper than no one's with me. I feel so alone. I think what people are really saying when they're in the middle of a place like that is, nobody understands what I'm going through. Nobody gets it. I think all of us have probably said at some point in our life, nobody understands how I feel. No one understands what I'm going through. No one understands how much I'm hurting right now. No one understands how incredibly insecure I am. No one understands. They haven't been in my shoes. They can't possibly relate. And I've learned through my own experiences of darkness and of journeying with other people in even greater darkness that I really don't understand what other people are feeling as they go through their own valley experiences. I don't. I will never begin to say, oh man, I know what you're feeling right now. I've been there. If you've interacted with me much on a personal basis, I think you probably would agree. If you think back on those moments of conversation, I didn't say, yeah, I get that. I said, you know what? I really don't know what it's like to walk in your shoes. I don't. But come with me. Let me introduce you to somebody who does. His name's Jesus. He's been there. He's been in your shoes. He knows. See, deep down inside, we all have this longing during difficult times to have someone, just one person who understands us perfectly. And in Jesus, friends, we have that someone. He understands. He has been there. He's walked in our shoes. He's faced our struggles. That is, once again, the why of Christmas. Why Christmas? Let me give it to you in a nutshell right here as we move toward a time of response. And I have a few more things I want to share, but I want you to get this in your core, in your spirit. And here it is. What is the why of Christmas? Why Christmas? if you're taking notes, the incarnation, that is, God becoming man, positioned Jesus to understand our darkness experientially. So that man could never again say, nobody understands. Nobody knows what I'm dealing with. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. We don't have a priest who is out of touch with our reality. He's been through weakness and testing, experienced it all but the sin. So let's walk right up to him and get what he is so ready to give. Take the mercy, accept the help. What does that mean? Did Jesus learn something in his incarnation that he didn't know before? Absolutely not. There's never been anything he didn't know. It wasn't a question of him gaining some knowledge or experience he needed, because it wasn't for his benefit, friends. It was for ours. Jesus didn't go to the cross for his benefit. He went to the cross to benefit us. So that at any point in life, any person going through any experience on this planet, in any part of the world, at any point in history, would be able to say, oh, Father, thank you that you understand what I'm going through because you've been there. He's experienced it all. Temptation, rejection, disappointment, abandonment, all of those, abuse, come on. From the time he was small, being misunderstood, even Jesus' parents left him behind one time, forgot about him. If you're scarred because your parents left you somewhere in a store and forgot you when you were a kid, get over it. Jesus has been there. He understands. He does. You're in good company. But more than that, you talk about rejection, his inner circle. How many have ever been rejected by those you thought loved you the most? Maybe you went through a painful divorce. Maybe you had your best friend abandon you. Maybe a business partner bankrupted that business partnership, and you feel like nobody's ever been through this. Jesus would say, yes, I have. His inner circle all bailed on him. Peter, all of them. And so we see that he was made like us in every way so we could have someone to turn to. And not only does Jesus understand completely, here's the good news. It's not like he just can offer sympathy or empathy. In other words, it's not just that he understands, but he steps into that space and has the power to deliver me. It's the creator of the universe that we're talking about. Samuel. Chapter 22, 2 Samuel. You are my light. You dispel my darkness. This Christmas, you may be feeling overwhelmed for some reason. Maybe you're facing one of the dark days that we referenced. Disappointment, despair, discouragement, depression. But the good news is this. Because of Christmas, listen, you don't have to stay in the dark. Jesus came to dispel the darkness. So the presence of God not only cheers me up when I'm disappointed, calms me down when I'm distressed, God's presence, third and finally, sees me through when I'm depressed. He can cheer me up, he can calm me down, and he'll see me through. I mean, he covered all the bases. What is there that doesn't fit categorically in one of those departments? So how do I then make this thing real? I'm going to give you 2 quick points of application, because even at this point, you all may be feeling inspired, but not empowered. So here's some language. How do I practice God's presence? How does it become real in my life? Number 1, I have to surrender myself to his loving authority. At some point in the journey, I have to come to a place and I just say, God, I surrender the best in how I trust you with this situation, even though I'm disappointed, I'm distressed, or I'm even depressed. I don't get it. I don't know why it's not working out the way I hoped or the way I anticipated, the way I envisioned it, but I'm choosing to trust you, and the evidence of my trust is complete surrender. He's not just around us or by us. He wants to live in us. And he wants to dwell in us by his Spirit so he can handle the stress around us. Because how many of you know stress comes from external stimuli that impacts us internally. Ephesians 5:18 has multiple applications, but I absolutely love this verse, and let me tell you why. He says in Ephesians 5:18, don't get drunk on wine. Now, I'm not going to do a quick message on drinking wine, okay? I'll save that for another day. Maybe on New Year's. Which leads to debauchery. But he says instead, be filled with the Spirit. He's drawing contrast here. And he's saying, don't get drunk. What he's saying is, be filled. It literally means to be living under the influence. What he's saying is this, don't let any outside influence have more authority in determining your well-being than the Spirit of the living God. Live under the influence of the Spirit, not under wine, not under drugs, not under food, not under shopping, not under money, not under gifts, not under people's opinion, not false identity. He's saying, get rid of all those, how many, let me just say this, get rid of all those small g gods that mess you up and don't help you out. And live continually under the influence of the Holy Spirit. When people are under pressure from the outside, they put something inside to equalize the pressure. It's our drug of choice. So we might choose alcohol, we might choose drugs, we might choose food, we might choose shopping, we might choose exercise to an extreme, we might choose, you fill in the blank. We might choose work. I choose that for a season. And Jesus himself wants to be the great equalizer and the stress reliever, but he has to be invited to take that space and occupy it. And so I willfully surrender. I say, God, I'm surrendering this part of my life to you, so you are the primary influence, equalizing the pressure and relieving the stress. And then finally, the second point is deliberately acknowledge his all-encompassing presence. Psalm 16, verses 8 and 9, I am always aware of the Lord's presence. Everybody read that with me. What's it say? Everybody. I am what? I'm always aware of the Lord's presence. He is near, and nothing can shake me. I'm so thankful and glad. I feel completely secure. What's he saying? He says, I am always aware of the Lord's presence. I have to live deliberately and intentionally aware of God's presence in my life, because if I am aware of his presence, when I'm disappointed, he'll cheer me up. When I'm distressed, he'll calm me down. And when I'm depressed, he'll see me through. As I acknowledge his presence. Let me just unload for 30 seconds something, and then we're going to pray. I'm sometimes troubled when I hear people pray things that are unbiblical. And here's a prime example. Lord, just be with us. We don't even have to ask him to be with us. He promised he'd never leave us. You're saying, well then, Keith, how should I pray? A more accurate prayer is, God, I thank you that you promised you'd never leave me, that you are always with me, and I acknowledge your presence right here, right now, in this place, in this moment, even though it seems like all hell's breaking loose, everything's going against me, and I don't like what's going on around me. I thank you that you are here in the midst of this, and you are with me right now, and I acknowledge your presence in this moment. That's a biblical prayer. And so we're going to do that right now. We're going to acknowledge the Lord's presence. And I think part of acknowledging God's presence is not only found in surrender, but verbally acknowledging it. But by doing something that our dear family that we're journeying through this season with is doing. And I'll come back and reference that after we worship for a little bit, because I don't want us to be distracted right now by another idea of application. I want our response right now. Let's all stand. Would you stand with me right now and just verbally say out loud, say it out loud, because there's a power of life and death in the tongue, and those who love will eat its fruit. You give life to the things of the Spirit, and you speak death to the things of darkness by the words that we say. The devil can't read your mind. And even though God can, he's waiting for you to ask, and he says you have not because you ask not. So let's just right now, in your own words, in your own way, just say, God, thank you for your presence here right now. Thank you for your presence in my life. Thank you that you're here, that you're with me, that you'll never leave me. You'll never abandon me. You'll never forsake me. I'll never again be on my own. And right now, God, I need you to cheer me up, to calm me down, to see me through. But I thank you that whatever I need, you are. And so I welcome your presence in this place in Jesus' name.